Welcome to today's Explainer. Okay, we're going to unpack something today that fundamentally rewires how we understand human drive. Most people think willpower is just a myth, right? Like some ethereal quality you either magically have or you don't. But today we're diving into the high-definition neurological reality of your brain's architecture. We are looking at a literal, physical part of your brain that grows only, and I mean absolutely strictly only, when you force yourself to do things you actively hate. Seriously, this isn't just self-help fluff. We are breaking down the ultimate biological mechanism for social mastery and extreme mental resilience. Okay, let's dive into this. For decades, we've been sold this idea that success is all about innate grit, that you're either destined to conquer the world or, destined to stay comfortably stuck on the couch. But we're challenging that myth head-on today. The secret to pushing through resistance isn't a personality trait at all. It's actually a physical, measurable brain structure. And what is so fascinating from a clinical perspective here is that this specific part of your brain just sits there completely dormant when you're comfortable. It only physically expands and strengthens when you are engaged in tasks you actively want to avoid. Crazy, right? To truly grasp this, we really have to understand how different minds process effort and their environment. Think of a standard spam filter brain. For most folks, the brain acts as this aggressive filter, basically hitting delete on about 90% of the sensory input in any given room, just to save metabolic energy. But then there's what we call the 8K IMAX brain. If you're a high achiever or a highly sensitive person, your brain doesn't delete that data. Not at all. Instead, it's screenshotting, analyzing, recording, and cross-referencing absolutely everything in stunning high definition. Now, having an 8K IMAX brain probably sounds like a massive advantage, and honestly, it is. But it comes with a pretty hefty biological cost. It's utterly exhausting. Because your nervous system is permanently set to perceive literally everything, you're highly susceptible to sensory and mental overload. So what's the natural biological response? Well, you default to safe behaviors. You retreat. You avoid taking on difficult new tasks because your brain is already working in overdrive, just processing the room you're sitting in. You end up seeking the path of least resistance, just to survive the sheer volume of data you're taking in.
Now, what's really interesting about this clean, clinical brain architecture we're looking at is that tiny structure right in the center. It's called the aMCC, the anterior midcingulate cortex. You can think of this as the literal muscle of tenacity. Neurological imaging actually shows us that this specific help increases in gray matter density. It gets physically thicker and stronger. But there is a catch. It only grows under one strict condition: voluntary challenge. It doesn't grow when you're forced to do something, and it absolutely doesn't grow when you're just chilling out. It only alters its physical structure when you purposefully choose to embrace discomfort.
So, let's break down how you actually build this using what we call the tenacity protocol. It's a simple step-by-step mechanism. Step 1, you're in your comfort zone. Here, the aMCC does absolutely nothing, flatline. Step 2, you initiate a voluntary challenge. You actively choose the friction. And when you do this, you trigger step 3, strict structural brain growth. This is a rigid one-to-one mechanism. Every single time you seek discomfort, you are directly re-architecting your brain. You're fundamentally upgrading your neural hardware to process complex, high-friction scenarios, all while the rest of the world just opts for comfort. Let's see how this translates into practical, everyday application. I like to think of the aMMC as the boring little bird dogs of the brain. If you've ever done physical therapy, you definitely know the bird dog exercise. It's highly specific, tedious, and frankly, super boring to do. But it's absolutely crucial to stabilize your entire physical core. Well, guess what? Your neural network works the exact same way. Doing specific, tedious, uncomfortable tasks, like dragging yourself through a grueling workout or grinding through a massive, boring dataset, these are the mental bird dogs required to stabilize your brain.
And this brings us to a really foundational concept. Doing the things you hate allows you to shoulder the heavy weights of life later on. By executing these small, incredibly uncomfortable tasks every single day, you're building out that core tenacity skill. So when a massive life crisis hits, or some heavy psychological burden is placed squarely on your shoulders, you won't collapse under the weight. Why? Because you've been doing your mental bird dogs. You've already built up the structural integrity in your aMC to handle acute stress like a pro.
But let's take a step back and look at where this highly sensitive, highly aware brain architecture actually comes from. Research often links this kind of neurological growth and high data processing to what we call the Raccoon Mindset of pure survivalists. This is usually deeply rooted in childhood. If you were a kid who had to grow up a little too fast, navigating really unpredictable environments, well, your brain had to adapt to survive. You had to become hypervigilant. This journey usually kicks off in stage 1 with parentification. That's when a child takes on adult responsibilities way too early. And this forces a rapid transition into stage 2. You learn to read the emotional temperature of a room. You get really good at detecting the absolute slightest shifts in mood or tension long before you reach stage 3, which is, learning to read actual chapter books. Your social and emotional radar was completely developed before your academic skills, entirely out of a primal need to stay safe.
So the crucial takeaway here is that this specific timeline wasn't just some random quirk of your childhood. No, it was a direct survival adaptation. It physically forced your nervous system to operate with crisis mode as its absolute default setting. Your brain learned very early on that missing a social cue could be downright dangerous. So what did it do? It wired itself to never ever miss a single detail again. And this is exactly why you have that 8K IMAX brain we were talking about earlier.
Now, this kind of history presents a really fascinating duality. On one side, obviously we see the heavy price tag, chronic mental exhaustion. Constantly scanning your environment for threats is incredibly draining. It takes a toll. But on the other side of the coin, we see a remarkable reward. You've essentially developed an elite, almost superhuman ability to treat social nuances as life or death data. You see the subtle things that everyone else completely misses. You are literally processing social dynamics at a master level.
The real secret to unlocking your potential, though, is learning how to harness all of this. Instead of letting that high-voltage conductive energy just bleed out into the room because you're constantly scanning everyone else's emotions, you have to intentionally lean into discomfort. By doing those hard, voluntary tasks to build your aMCC, you actually take that external conductive energy and you turn it inward. You make a pivot. You transition from managing a room full of tension to managing your own incredibly powerful neural network.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens next. A profound shift occurs in your brain chemistry. See, a brain that's constantly avoiding discomfort gets stuck in a dopamine-seeking loop. You're easily distracted, always looking for those quick, cheap hits of comfort. But when you actively engage in a voluntary challenge, you force your brain to shift into an acetylcholine-driven state. This is the precise, clinical neurochemical state of deep focus, absolute clarity, and profound introspection. You literally change the type of fuel your brain is running on. This process is exactly how you directly engineer advanced social interaction skills. By strengthening the aMCC, you achieve true social mastery. Think about it. Your overactive mirror neurons, they stop being this massive liability that constantly drains you, and they become a precise, analytical tool. You become a calm, highly calculated human lie detector. And most importantly, because your aMCC is so robust, you have the internal tenacity to stay completely grounded and totally calm, even when everyone else around you is completely spiraling out of control. I really want you to let this sink in for a second. If you've ever been told that you're too sensitive or that you overthink absolutely everything, I need you to hear this. You are exactly what survival needed. Your highly sensitive architecture was brilliantly, beautifully built to keep you safe in unpredictable times. You aren't too much. You are wonderfully complex. And now, by actively training your muscle of tenacity, you are finally proving just how incredibly powerful that neurological architecture can actually be. So, I want to leave you with a provocative final thought for today's explainer, and I seriously challenge you to act on it immediately. What is one boring bird dog task that you have been actively avoiding that you are going to tackle today? Is it a really difficult conversation? A super tedious piece of work? Maybe an intense, grueling workout? Whatever it is, I want you to lean into that friction and start building your aMCC right now. Drop a comment below with your specific task so we can solidify this learning together. Keep building that tenacity, and I'll see you in the next explainer.